being here, particularly in light of the extreme repression and propaganda that's directed towards the Palestine solidarity movement in Germany by the German government, by the mainstream media. It is really an act of community care, humanity, and resistance to come together, pool this collective energy, educate ourselves, and think critically about how we can drive the movement forward and support our Palestinian comrades and siblings in Gaza, in the occupied West Bank, and in the diaspora. So thank you all so much. Really, really appreciate you being here. I'm Rachel Shapiro. I'm an anti-Zionist Jew and activist from Sozialismus von unten, which is a revolutionary Marxist organization. We organized in Germany across a variety of different causes, but very focused on the Palestine movement. I am here with two very wonderful activists who I'm delighted to introduce, and as well as one who is on her way. So our first speaker is Patrick Bond. Patrick directs the University of Johannesburg Center for Social Change. In the 1980s, he was a divestment activist and worked directly with BDS activists in Ramallah and Gaza in the early 2010s. He was born in Ireland, raised in the US, and has lived in South Africa since 1990. Our second speaker is Barbara Schreiner, South African activist who is involved in the struggle against apartheid and continues to be active as a voice for social justice. She recently spent a week reporting in the West Bank with a group of fellow South Africans and is the executive director of the Water Integrity Network. Nadija Samour, I think probably a lot of us are familiar with, is on her way. She is a Palestinian lawyer based in Berlin and was recently the subject of a documentary by Al Jazeera. And Nadija will give us an update on the situation in Berlin and speak about the Palestinian solidarity movement in a German context. So we will first hear from our three panelists. Then we will open the discussion to contributions and questions from the audience. One quick note: to protect privacy, if you are taking pictures from the back and plan to post on social media, please be aware of blurring out faces, given the broader context. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Patrick.
Vielen Dank, Rachel. Ich werde auf Englisch sprechen. Ich bin hier, ich besuche, ich kann ein kleines bisschen Deutsch, ich bin ein Viertel Deutsch, aber ihr solltet zwei Wörter auf Zulu lernen jetzt, ja. Before we start, two words in Zulu that we always start with in South Africa, because we're all here in the same way that we have meetings in South Africa to empower our masses. So we have two words: amandla, power, away to the people. Amandla, and then you say Owetu very loudly. Amandla! Owetu! Amandla! Owetu! Amandla! Owetu! Hey, they're honorary South Africans. Yeah. Those are Zulu words. Amandla, power. Owetu, to the people. And the ways in which, if we trace back, South Africans won liberation, combined the mass struggles with the BDS strategy. And my first approach here, before Comrade Barbie gives you an update from the West Bank front, before Nadija comes with more of her incredibly important strengthening advice for Berliners, my simple approach is to say there are structural similarities and differences that help us locate where BDS can take us forward. The military struggles, the political struggles you have against your genocidaire supporting government. Those struggles you know what to do with. But I was asked by these comrades to say, what were some of the ways BDS helped to change the balance of forces in the 1980s? So very quickly, to sum up, we do two things usually: a structural analysis. Yeah, my background was in Marxist theory, my supervisor, David Harvey. So my apologies, but I will say that the race-class discussion in South Africa that also helped us to understand settler colonial power and how to weaken it, that comes in stages. And a man called Ben Magubane, a sociologist, has a very good theoretical way of posing stages of capitalism that need capitalism and racism to work together, but then change. And I feel that's useful if we think of how Israel treats its labor needs. Because the South African experience with settler colonialism, yes, with Portuguese slavery from the late 1400s, and then with the Dutch settling in 1652 in Cape Town, and then when minerals were found in the 1870s, the diamonds of Kimberley and the gold of Johannesburg in the 1880s, each of those represented ways capitalism needed racism, but differently. So Vasco da Gama, the sailor from Portugal, used slaves. The extinction of the Khoisan was the objective. The extermination of the people that Jan van Riebeck in the Dutch East India Company found in 1652. His objective to clear the land around Cape Town for an agricultural way station for Dutch mercantilism. And then comes Cecil John Rhodes with this diabolical system to put black bodies deep into the diamond mines. And then later the Anglo-American Corporation to put black bodies deep into the gold mines, but to have those men, 40,000 who died to get gold, to have those men come to work very cheap required a Bantustan. That was a homeland for the different ethnic groups. It was a long way away, and the men would travel by train. And the women in the Bantustan had, with all of the patriarchy and repression, they had these responsibilities to raise the men and as children, to make sure that if they were injured or sick, brought home from their jobs in the mines and the factories and the fields, that they would recover. Or when they were older, the men with no pension would go back. Do you see the Bantustan as a system of cheapening male labor by sexist systems that white corporates in Johannesburg set up? And really we think of the first of these as Cecil Rhodes. So these are the systems of capitalism and racism, sexism, and of course, ecological destruction, because it was depleting the mineral wealth and creating massive pollution. Those systems of apartheid capitalism, of settler colonialism, partly can be translated when we analyze Israel and its need at some points for Palestinian labor. But at some point, it doesn't. What is crucial, though, as we thought about how this system, settler colonial, racist capitalism, worked in South Africa, we looked for its weak points. So I'll finish with a little memory that Comrade Barbie, who was living in Johannesburg in 1985, I was a student in Baltimore in the US, but we would go to the banks in the US and in Britain, and Commerzbank and Deutsche Bank, and there were lots of Swiss banks as well, and they were lending to the apartheid regime. So we would go and protest. The mid-1980s was the height of the upsurge of protest in South Africa. And it was easy from that standpoint to remind our fellow citizens and our bank customers that there was a vulnerability and that the profits that the banks were making from apartheid South Africa, at the same time they green-lined, they made loans to the rich white government and companies. They, at the same time, red-lined, they wouldn't make loans in black neighborhoods in Baltimore, and all over the US. So these contradictions and these attempts to link the issues are what BDS is very explicit about. Omar Barghouti, one of the founders in 2005, with many civil society groups, said these would be our objectives: to ensure the right of return, the end of discrimination. These were the projects of BDS, but the actual implementation is to link these issues. What happened in 1985 was incredibly encouraging, because at some point that vulnerability and the delegitimization of the apartheid system was so, let's say, advanced, and the protests were so strong, that it didn't take much to push the banks to the point they said, no more loans to P.W. Botha. Now, Botha, when he heard this, reacted. September 1985, he did three things. He defaulted on about $13 billion It was a lot then for South Africa, 13 billion in foreign debt. And secondly, he closed the stock market. And thirdly, he imposed exchange controls. He bought some time by manipulating the financial power that they had. Well, it caused a rift. There were white Afrikaners, mainly, controlling the South African state. And then there were the white English-speaking businesses in Johannesburg. Suddenly, the BDS was a wedge. It split and opened up, changing the power and allowing, to all of our surprise, 9 years later, the objective, one person, one vote in a unitary state. This is, in a sense, the legacy that makes the apartheid experience, where it can be weakened with this combination from below, and the solidarity you want to give to the struggles of Palestinians to be free. South Africa had to do many deals to get to one person, one vote. We could argue that there was a Faustian pact. We've read Goethe, we know what Mephistopheles did. It was F.W. de Klerk. And even Mandela was brought into the Faustian pact. But the point is, he never sold out on one person, one vote, because he had a power behind him. The power that meant international allies of the South African liberation struggle. They could go again and again to their biggest companies, their biggest banks, and say, BDS apartheid. I think that's what we're going to do here, because what the Palestinians have shown us, they will not die. We will be there in whatever way. And that means for BDS, I think those two words are very important again before I turn to Comrade Barbie. Amandla, away to. Amandla, away to. Comrade.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm going to give you some personal reflections. I'm a white South African, born into apartheid, spent a lot of my life fighting against apartheid, then spent some of my life trying to make government work in the post-apartheid situation. Failed in many ways, but that's a different story. That's not a story for tonight. I had the benefit over Christmas to spend a week in the West Bank. There was a Lutheran minister in Bethlehem who requested the South African Christian leaders, progressive leaders in South Africa, to come to Bethlehem to show solidarity. I'm not part of the Christian community in South Africa, but for reasons that don't need to be explained, I was part of the trip to Palestine, and I spent a week in Palestine and briefly in Tel Aviv. And as a white South African, it was an extraordinary experience because the resonance with my experience in apartheid South Africa was extraordinary. But we all agreed on the trip that it was apartheid on steroids. It was worse than anything that ever happened in South Africa. I think what I became very conscious of on the trip was the extent of how this is a colonial land grab. This has nothing to do with religion or any of those issues. This is a colonial land grab, and like all colonial land grabs, it is based on violence and force. But going with that is a level of humiliation and dehumanization of the Palestinian people, and seeing it firsthand was remarkable. So, you know these things, but then you see them firsthand, and it really hits home. So just a couple of things. I mean, apart from the fact that there are separate roads for Israelis and Palestinians, that you have a license plate that allows you on these roads or on those roads. We never reached that stage in South Africa. Apart from those kind of things, the humiliation involves, on the personal level, people being arrested, detained, detention without trial, 180 days with no access to a lawyer now. We only made it to 90 days in South Africa, although they would release you and then arrest you 2 days later, detain you 2 days later, give you another 90 days, but it was 90 days. Talk of prisoners being stripped, being beaten, being forced to sing the Israeli national anthem. The theme of stripping coming through commonly, stripping of men, not of women, but doctors in a hospital in Gaza being forced to come out by the Israeli occupying force, being forced to strip, being taken away, stripped down. But also there's a whole thing that's happening around the land that is... I mean, there are all sorts of attempts to force Palestinians off the land, which I'll get to. But part of it involves the sewage from settlements, from the illegal Israeli settlements, being allowed to flow out onto Palestinian land, which renders the land unworkable, but is also part of that humiliation, part of that degradation. The other thing that I became very aware of when I was there around the wall, and the wall in Bethlehem blew my mind because it's twice as high as this room, and then there's a fence on top as well. It makes the Berlin Wall look fairly pathetic. It doesn't have a militarized zone on either side of it, though. But the purpose of that wall is not to separate Israelis from Palestinians. The purpose of that wall is to separate Palestinians from their land. Because if they can't get to work the land, then the land is declared unused and Israel seizes it for settlements. And that for me was fascinating because it's really part of that colonial land grab. And I've worked in the water sector for the past 30 years. No land grab happens without water grab as well. Water is controlled by Israel. When we were in Bethlehem, it was made very clear to us that the Israeli settlements get about 4 times the amount of water that residents of Bethlehem get. There is groundwater under Bethlehem, but they're not allowed to use it because it's controlled by Israel. So a massive colonial violent grab. And part of that is also the undermining of whatever fragile economy Palestine had. Being in Bethlehem over Christmas, the Bethlehem economy is 80% due to tourism. There were no tourists. We were talking to shopkeepers who had not sold anything for 2 months. Bethlehem has been blockaded. We had to get off the bus and walk into Bethlehem because you couldn't actually drive in. And it brought back to me huge memories of being in South Africa. The whole issue, so South Africa ended up with, let me get the figures right, 70% of the population living on, 80% of the population living on 13% of the land. It's the same process of a particular group pushing out the indigenous community onto smaller and smaller pieces of land. The humiliation that black people experienced in South Africa is exactly what is happening in Palestine. But the other thing that struck me when we were in Tel Aviv was just to what extent Israelis have drunk the Kool-Aid. And I was growing up as a white South African who objected to apartheid. It was terrifying how much white South Africans had drunk the Kool-Aid. They were fed a stream of lies by the South African government. Israelis are fed a stream of lies by the Israeli government. There are obviously Israelis who are standing up against it, but they're facing incredible repression. Really, for quite minor things, they are facing incredible repression. But a lot of people, we spoke to one young man whose cousin was one of the hostages that was taken on the 7th of October. And what struck me was that he was in deep personal pain, obviously. But he had no understanding of why this might have happened. Hamas were the bad guys. We're the good guys. And it was really, for me, quite tragic that people didn't have anything of that conception. I think that the last thing that I want to say about my experience about being in the West Bank was that what's going on in Gaza at the moment has to be a priority. It absolutely has to be. We have to do everything that we can to stop the genocide, but we cannot lose sight of what's happening in the West Bank as well. And I'm a little worried that it's getting pushed off the agenda because there's a whole lot of stuff still going on in the West Bank that is part of a much bigger, longer struggle, and we have to retain a focus on that as well. So let me now just briefly talk about the South African case to the ICJ, and let me say that the South African government has made lots of disastrous decisions over the past 30 years. We really screwed up on a whole lot of stuff. But yes, we are proud to be South Africans at the moment. So I'm not a lawyer, okay? And I'm not going to go into the details of the case. But I think it's important to realize that what is happening at the moment is not trying to get a ruling on whether it is a genocide or not. if that ruling ever happens, it'll take years to get to that point. The processes are enormously slow. What is on the table at the moment is around trying to get interim measures put in place. The key one of which is that Israel must actually stop bombing the shit out of people. I'm allowed to say that on live stream. The interesting thing, of course, is going to be how long it takes to get that decision. In terms of the Guatemala-Venezuela case, I think it took 2 weeks. In terms of Ukraine, it took 1 week. We'll see how long it takes in this case. We all know, everybody sitting in this room, probably everybody who's listening on live stream, knows that Ukrainian lives are worth more than Palestinian lives. And one of the things that I think we have to seriously do is try to change that and make sure that people actually understand the value of Palestinian lives. So I think one of the things about the South African case is that Israel is trying to argue that they have the right of self-defense. What South Africa is arguing is that you don't have the right of self-defense when you're an occupying power illegally on the land. And I think, you know, whatever the results of the case may be, and this case is going to be partly on legal merits, largely on political grounds as well. This is highly political. But whatever the results of the case, I think that it's already changed things. I think it's already put out in the public space a whole lot of a brilliantly written 84 pages of argument, and it's put some really important issues on the table. And I think that more than Israel being on trial, which they are, and I think they know they are, and I think they're worried by it. More than that, I think Western moralism is on trial, and Western double standards are on trial. And I think that's been a critical part of what has come out of that. Let me leave it at that point.
I was not aware you're going to start so on time.
Yeah, I am Patrick. Nice to meet with you.
Over there.
Okay, thank you very much, Patrick. Thank you very much, Barbara. We'll give Nadija a quick minute maybe to get settled, or?
That would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually brought some. Because you spoke so eloquently without any adjustments. Good evening, everybody. Apologies for being late. The room is full. This is awesome. My name is Nadija Samour. I was introduced to you as a lawyer, so allow me to bore you a little bit with some legal knowledge, but I promise you it has something to do with apartheid, and it has something to do with the BDS movement. And of course, the ICJ case, South Africa versus Israel, has to come up and has been brought up already. And I just want to underline how touched I am by this, by this brave and strong motion. And I'm sure you've all heard about the Namibian intervention as well, slamming Germany for its outrageous so-called intervention into the proceedings, which only serves to prolong and push back any positive outcome for Gaza at this time. And I'm sure you've also heard about the initiative of Bosnian genocide survivors asking the ICJ, asking the international community not to repeat the mistakes that have been made in Bosnia. So all of these people coming together because they see what is very, very clearly in my eyes, and I mean, who am I, but in the eyes of so many people, so many lawyers, so many experts, so many survivors, they all agree that the case is so strong to argue that what is going on, what is happening to people in Gaza by Israel is a genocide. And now, allow me to use this opportunity to talk to you a little bit about the German situation, because after all, I'm a German Palestinian lawyer, and I would like to share with you something that I think could also help us here to have clarity when we mobilize. We've heard from our comrades today that there is lots of experience in combating apartheid in South Africa by the boycott movement. And as you all know, there's the BDS movement. And one of the demands is the right of return. We will boycott, divest, sanction until the right of return of Palestinian refugees is realized. And we are here in Berlin in a place where the largest Palestinian refugee community outside of the Middle East lives. And I think in the past weeks we saw how the German government, as one of the biggest allies and mostly complicit in Israel's genocide against the Palestinians, we've seen how this government has tried to suppress that community in particular, and along with it, those who stand in solidarity. And I want to bring this up because one of the many reports talking about apartheid is the Amnesty International report. I'm sure you've all heard about it. And what I think is a very interesting point, and a point that so far has not gained the attention it deserves, is that the Palestinian refugees who are outside of the territory of historic Palestine or occupied Palestine also are the subjects of the crime of apartheid. You see, because Israel, the settler colonialist project, is based on fragmentation and elimination. And I'm sure what the comrade has seen in Palestine, in Bethlehem, the wall, the checkpoints, all of that is, of course, a very vivid form, very real form of fragmentation. The fact that Palestinians in Gaza are also under occupation, but above all under siege and the victims of genocide at this very moment, also shows how this part of the Palestinian people is being fragmented. The Palestinian people who live on the territories that were occupied in 1948, those who are officially Israeli citizens but really are third-class citizens, are another group that has been fragmented under the settler colonial project of Israel. And the diaspora is yet another group that fell victim of the fragmentation policies of this settler colonial project, of which apartheid, of course, is its quote-unquote form of managing this kind of fragmentation and colonization. So let's, for a moment, have a look at this group of people, of this fragmented group of people, the Palestinian refugees here outside of Palestine, and especially here in Berlin and in Germany, because what we've seen in the past weeks, some people have been calling it silencing, which of course is a term that is fitting for sure. But I would like to give it another layer, perhaps, or another dimension. Because if we think about settler colonialism, we think about elimination, right? We think about the indigenous people that has to be eliminated from the territory for the settlers to establish their project. And if you think of the refugees as part of this indigenous population outside of the territory, then they have already been eliminated from that territory, but they are still there. They are still subjects. They're still loud. They still demand the right to return. They still demand the right to basically exist. And taking away, or at least attempting to take away, platforms for those people, the right to protest, freedom of speech, or the right to stay, because we're talking about a huge deportation wave that is awaiting us. If we think about these people and their rights being taken away, then for me, thinking in these terms of settler colonialism, it is nothing else than elimination. It's eliminating their voices. It's not solely silencing or pushing to the fringes or to the margins, but it is a project of elimination. And this is where Germany becomes complicit again. I'm very happy you talked about all the experience you made in terms of actually, of direct action, going to the banks and demanding to divest and demanding to isolate the project of apartheid in South Africa. And I want to underline here, because this room is full of activists and organizers and people I've seen in the front lines on Sonnenallee, defending the right to protest and to freedom of speech. Keep in mind that we live in this country that is funding genocide at the moment, that is funding apartheid, that is a crucial ally for Israel at the moment. And keep in mind that there are all these ammunition factories and all these factories that actually produce arms that are right now, ammunition, and right now being used in Gaza. And I want to, perhaps when we open the floor, ask the activists who are here and who are organizing right now against these factories of death and destruction, to share with us what can be done right now as a form of direct action to demand the sanction, the embargo against Israel in order for this genocide to stop right now, because I totally agree with you that this is our focus as of today, without, of course, losing sight of what is happening in Palestine and what has been happening in Palestine. And perhaps this is what I was hoping to share or to hear tonight. Let's talk also about visions. Let's talk about, the South African experience and everything that perhaps went wrong or was not the promises that have not been fulfilled. And perhaps there are visions that we can share for Palestine with that experience of the South African comrades in order for not to repeat those mistakes, and in order to, have perhaps one day one of those meetings in Palestine altogether.
Thank you so much, Nadija. Thank you so much to our speakers. Let's just have another round of applause. This has been phenomenal. So one quick note before we open the floor to contributions from the audience. We will be passing around a piece of paper to sign up for the Berlin Left newsletter to keep you informed about future events like this. This will be coming throughout the crowd at the moment. With that said, would be happy to open up for contributions, questions, anything that comes to mind. I think we'll start by having people speak, and if there are a lot of questions, then we'll be able to direct them towards our panelists, but after a little while. So And I don't think it's going to be feasible given the room layout for people to use the microphone. So if you can just stand up and speak as loudly as you can, that would be great.
But will that be filmed or recorded? I think it's important for people, right, to know if when we stand up, we will be filmed and recorded.
Do we want to?
Can repeat the question from the front, so for the microphone.
Sure. Yep, we can do that. Well, yes, if there's a question, I can repeat it from the front. To the degree that you're standing up and giving a contribution and a bit of a speech, which we'll limit to 3 minutes, this will be live streamed, but not with a face. I don't think. Just with the audio. Yes.
I would like to say something before I'm asking my questions. I was coming today because I want to thank you all to be here, to be pro-Palestine, and I would like to express myself with my weak language, so I'm sorry for that. I would like to thank Nadija, because it was my subject right now. I'm Palestinian. My father and my grandfather was in Jaffa, Tel Aviv right now, and I know it's priority, it's Gaza and occupation right now, but about politics and about occupation, I still heard occupation from even people who pro-Palestine, but it's behind of all this story. There's too many people, refugee people in Lebanon, in camps, in Egypt, in Jordanian, in Syrian, in Berlin, in Brazil, everywhere, and we feel like we are forgetting. We are piece of this case. We are from Palestine, and occupation is not just West Bank and Gaza. Everyone, he saw me and he asked me why I wear that. He thought I am from Gaza, and he asked me if I have family in Gaza. Yeah, I have people in Gaza. I know people in Gaza. They are my people, but there is no family in Gaza belong to me. Our family at in 48, they are go away. They thrown away in the sea. My father, he was 13 years old, and they throw him away. Haganah, this is terror organization. Haganah, they throw them away in sea and his family, and then they start swimming and to find out to go to Lebanon and Egypt, and then they arrive to Syria. So Palestine is not just West Bank and Gaza. Palestine is Jaffa, Haifa, Akka, Ramallah, and Naqab, Gaza and West Bank, and Nablus and Jenin. Palestine is not just two places, and the people who stay there in Palestine right now, they are in live prison in Gaza and West Bank, and they cannot do anything. So I'll try to put a light spot on the people who right now is forgetting, like me and like my father. We are there, we are exist, and our voice will be rise and free Palestine.
Viva, viva Gaza!
My question is, how can I defend my case? How can I speak about my right to return to my land, to my fatherland, Jaffa, without I have problem with German government, without I have problem with every time I speak about that, they call me anti-Semitic. In my belief, in my thing, the problem is not Jewish and Muslim, it's not Arabic and German. The problem is there is a right that my fatherland, my father flat, my father work, and his future, and my future. Because I'm right now 38 years old. Before I was applied to German citizens, no one. I don't have passport. I don't have any nationality. There is a lot of people like me. They don't have passport and nationality. So how can I defend my case when I don't even have the right to speak about it? Like right now. Thank you.
was like a, let's say, practical discussion. Thank you, first of all, for giving that comment about what are the consequences of the entrance of Germany to the cause in the International Court of Justice. I didn't see that. Like, it actually has, like, they gave them like 3 weeks to keep on bombing Gaza. That's basically what they did. I didn't see it like that. So thank you, first of all, for that. But then I think, I mean, my perception before hearing this was that it opened a tactical position in Germany, which is interesting, because Israel, international law, normally states don't follow international law. I mean, international law exists, but states never follow rulings. It's very uncommon that states follow rulings. So what would probably happen is that there will be a ruling against Israel, like demanding immediate measures. Israel will say no. But Israel was sued. Israel didn't choose to be in the trial. Germany did. So they have like a special position, and I think my perception, I'm sharing this to see like if people agree with me. It's like if you're in a bar and you have like a drunk friend, and the bartender comes, and your friend is doing like a scandal, and your friend comes, the bartender comes to you and asks, is this your friend? And you say, yes, you're fucked. I mean, you have to take care of your drunk friend, you have to take him home or whatever, right? And I think Germany is exactly in this position right now, because Germany comes to support Israel in this case. The ruling will be against Israel. Israel will have to abide by the ruling, let's say by paper, but then Germany will be part of the case, and Germany will be in the position to like take his friend home, let's say. Germany will have to ask Israel in some way or another to abide with international law. And I think this, I mean, even though like it has like very terrible consequences in the short term, I think it opens a door for like activism. Like, because in the end, like what we're going to ask, we are going to, let's say there's the opportunity to shift the discourse, like facing all the censorship or like the pressure that's like, currently, not to like talk about like stop the bombing. We can just say now like, please make Israel follow like a ruling in a trial in which you participate. I don't know what everyone thinks about that.
I have a simple question. I think South Africa wants to.
Louder.
I think South Africa plans to sue USA and England for complicity in the genocide with Israel. What are the possibilities to sue also Germany?
Yeah, Phil.
Okay. I'm really glad that Nadija said there are people in the room who've been organising demonstrations, who've been protesting about Rheinmetall, about German arms companies. I really want to hear what you're doing and how we can help you in terms of the demonstrations. And one of the organisers of this meeting, here's one of the things that we're doing, because we've realised two things. On the one hand, we've got a problem. We're in Germany. It's not just the German government who is silent on Palestine. Yeah. We set up 2 months ago. We set up a Palestine reading group, and we had tale and tale and tale of people coming and saying, "I need to talk about Palestine, but I'm scared of talking to my German friends because soon they will be my ex-friends." So that's one of the things happening. At the same time, every single poll says a majority of Germans don't like what Israel's doing. A majority of Germans support the Palestinians. The problem is that each and every one of them, or certainly most of them, are scared to speak out. They're worried it's too complicated. What did my grandfather do? What about the history? And for them, it's an easier life not to say anything about Palestine, even though in their head they know what's going wrong. So I think one of the things that we're doing now in our reading group, we've got a new policy, which is bring a white German. we know we know things about Palestine. We're there to educate ourselves. That's great, but we need to get out of ourselves. We need to get out of this room and to talk to people. Go to people in our sports clubs. Go to our relatives. Go to the people we work with, and say you cannot be silent in a time of genocide. Yeah. And I think it is not that all Germans are feeling happy about what's going on, But we need to break them out. We need to get them to the demonstrations. Next week, so Friday next week, we have someone who's come over from Gaza, who's going to be talking about what's happening there in Oyun. You can find more about it on a mailing list and things like that. Hmm?
She's here.
She's here. She's here.
Oh.
To make a contribution as well. Please come to our meeting next week. But please also bring your German friends. Let's take the discussion to them and let's build a movement so that it's not Germany is not the only country where there's not enough people on the streets. If they can get hundreds of thousands in London, we can get hundreds of thousands in Berlin. It starts with a single step, and we need to be making that step now.
So about the ICJ case, I want to ask something. So I don't really know that much about it. What is Germany going to do right now? What does this support mean? Are they going to submit more evidence on behalf of Israel, or are they going to try, I don't know, improve Israel's arguments, or what is Germany's plan? What are they gonna do exactly for Israel to win this case? And the second thing about the about losing German friends, I just lost one, and it was like really sad about it, because it was a friend of mine. We were friends since 5 years maybe. Talked about this issue one time, and I patiently listened to her. I told her everything I know, and in the end she terrorist and Hamas was the worst thing. Basically comparing the value of lives of Israelis who died in October, who died since October 7. I don't do that, but she was doing that, and it was yeah, in the end, yeah, we're not friends anymore, unfortunately. To keep this conversation going with her. So that's the problem. She was the one who stopped it. And I don't know, how can I just convince these people, just fucking talk about it? Let's talk. I can just sit there and hear your bullshit about this all night, but you can't hear me talking about Palestinians for 1 hour. This is just wrong, and wrong. And I'm really hating my guts that I moved to this country. I'm not. Why the fuck? I could just stay in my land, whatever, and do something, but this place annoys me so much, and I hate that Germany is so strong, that Germany has so much money, and we're all here as immigrants and contributing and paying taxes. I just hate it. I don't know what to do.
So I'm gonna, if it's okay with everyone, I'm gonna say something really quickly, and I'll keep my contribution also very limited. But in response to what Phil has said, and in response to what this comrade here has said, so I'm a Jewish person. I'm from the U.S. I am a descendant of Holocaust survivors, and in Germany in particular, my voice is worth so much more than my Palestinian comrades, and there is nothing that makes me angrier than that fact. And I think as a Jewish person, it's been a matter of my privilege, but also responsibility, to take the focus off of myself and move it to my Palestinian comrades and say, just because I am Jewish does not mean my voice is relevant. That being said, there is a huge amount of privilege to being Jewish in Germany and to taking up that space and being able to say, I'm not anti-Semitic, and if you stand up against war crimes and genocide, that doesn't make you anti-Semitic. At the same time, I also want to share something that I found helpful, because my family has been calling me anti-Semitic for years, which is very painful. It's also really comical. But something that I found to be true is that if people are deeply ingrained in the propaganda and brainwashing that comes from Zionism, that is fed into Jewish people, but also fed into Germans, there's only so much that you're really going to be able to do outside of exposing them to the truth and allowing them to come to their own conclusions about it. And that's very painful because it means that we can lose, at least temporarily, friends and family. But it also means that we can redirect our energy into more fruitful channels. And this has been something that I've told myself over and over again. I'm not going to sit down and have a useful conversation with a family member who's shouting at me that I'm a terrorist because I support Hamas and they're terrorists. There's nowhere to go from. That's not a fruitful conversation. We have to insist on having conversations at a regulated level around here when people are at like an 11. And doing that is really difficult, and that's part of the challenge. But I think in recognizing who it's going to be useful to have a conversation with and who is just at that point too deep in their own Zionist conditioning will allow us to be more effective in moving forward. That being said, I think we've gotten like 5 or 6 questions, and maybe it makes sense to pause and give our speakers an opportunity to address questions. I'll repeat them really quickly. So our first question was, how do we think about, or from our comrade here, how do I think about defending my right to return and my right to speak about Palestinian identity in a German context, which silences and basically erases Palestinian nationality and identity?
But not in Gaza and with West Bank, also in the historical Palestine. That was important for him.
So not just in Gaza and the West Bank, but also in historical Palestine, in the 48 territories, I assume. Yeah. The second question was, how do we think about Germany's relationship with Israel, and how do we put pressure on the German government to shift the discourse and influence Israel's action as the drunk friend at a bar? What are possibilities for suing Germany? And what is Germany going to do right now at the ICJ, and what does that support mean? I think Nadija gives me. I think Nadija is
gonna. Okay, I'm not gonna. Oh, is this? Should I use this perhaps? I actually thought, it would be so interesting to hear from our South African comrades, because what I have been told is that the anti-apartheid movement was also called anti-white, and I was wondering if this is some form of derailing argument that we also see when we are called anti-Semitic. I will just perhaps, that would be really interesting, because I think there is something to understand and how certain arguments are being fabricated. I just want to remind us, for example, that there was, now it has a different name, but there was a department in Israel called the Department for Strategic Affairs, or the Ministry for Strategic Affairs. And they had this department solely responsible to think about how to combat the 2 biggest enemies of Israel, namely Iran and BDS. Which of course is a very interesting, tells us a lot what Israel is actually scared of. And in this department, certain arguments against the BDS movement have been invented, propagandistic people have been sitting down and inventing those arguments, and one of them being, let's call them anti-Semitic. And especially in Germany, this will be our joker. This will work because the Nazis, they boycotted Jewish goods and Jewish businesses, and we will compare this because this is what works in Germany in particular. So it has been more or less tailored to this particular situation. And I'm just reminding us that this is a very powerful accusation, because we are people, I believe all of us in this room believe that the world should be free of anti-Semitism, of any form of racism, of any form of oppression, any form of violence based on how people look or who they love or what language they speak, and so on and so forth. I'm 100% sure that we all share these values and these visions. And this is why the accusation of being anti-Semitic is a very heavy one, because this is exactly what we're fighting against, and yet here we are being put in that particular corner. And in plus, in Germany, it serves two more ideas. Of course, in Germany, being called an anti-Semite means social death. You're a persona non grata when you are being called an anti-Semite, and the government knows that, the media knows that, and so by having this judgment over a person means social death, and you do not have a platform for that. Recently, there have been at least two experiences exactly about this. There is a comrade, an anti-Zionist Jewish comrade, organized in the Jewish Voice for Peace, and he has been asked to give an interview in one of the leading papers in Germany. And once they realized that he is member of the Jewish Voice, he was disinvited again from giving this interview. And something similar happened basically to me. When I was asked to give an interview in one of the leading newspapers in Germany, they got back to me and told me, they Googled my name and they saw that I'm a BDS supporter. Now, this way you basically, you exclude certain people from having platforms and for voicing dissident opinions. The other thing, how the accusation of anti-Semitism works too here is by saying that we overcame this, we as white Germans, we overcame this, and so whoever is still an anti-Semite basically is someone who really is a backward person, who is a very uncivilized person, and perhaps this already you start associating with backwardness and being uncivilized people who are being colonized, non-white people, uncivilized people, backwards people, and so the accusation of anti-Semitism serves to say there is a line between us who are civilized and those who are uncivilized. The same works with, for example, white feminism. The same works with, for example, homo nationalism. So it serves the exact same idea of segregating and differentiating between the civilized and the uncivilized. Now, I have been talking too much about this point. I'm very sorry about this, but I just felt the need to mention this. And so I also don't want to give too much space to the ICJ motion now, because I think it deserves a meeting for itself. But perhaps, I think what is so special, or what opens the opportunity, an opportunity for us or for activists, for organizers, is that the crime of genocide, as opposed to other crimes, there's war crimes, there's crimes against humanity, crime of aggression and all of that, but the crime of genocide means that there's a duty to not only punish those who commit a genocide, but to stop genocide, to prevent genocide. And this duty, of course, first and foremost, is on the states, but it is also on the civil society. So we are bound by a decision. We are already bound because of our values, of course. But if there is a decision, an ICJ decision, to say, okay, we have to take preliminary measures, because I agree it will take many years until we have a final decision, but preliminary measures, then we all of us here in the room are bound by this decision. And I think it does open ways to formulate certain demands and to organize in a certain way, and to have a stronger argument on our side. And then so possibilities to sue Germany because of intervening in this case. Just very briefly, from a legal perspective, from an international legal perspective, no one really understands why Germany is doing that, because legally speaking, because the grounds for the procedural laws that allow parties, or that even oblige parties to intervene, they do not really fit in this case, except if we want to perhaps say, and I'm not sure if Germany is saying that, they are affected by South Africa's charge that Israel is committing genocide. Perhaps they misunderstood, and they thought they are attacking us as well, and perhaps this isn't really a misunderstanding, but perhaps they are trying to tell us that they are part of committing genocide. They are part of the perpetrators. I'm not sure if Germany really wanted to tell us this. And of course, we all have to keep in mind that there's no enforcement of the judgment. The ICJ is the highest court, of course, in this world, but it has no police, and it depends on the state parties to enforce any measures that are that should be taken, or any judgment that should be met. So it is, in the end, again, us, the activists, the civil society, the people that will have to push to enforce this judgment. And then I just want to remind us, of course, we live in Germany, and fighting here is very hard and very draining, and also dangerous to some extent. But just remember that we are in the belly of the beast. And this, I think, our position here and our presence here is so particularly important. I think if we were in a place where solidarity with Palestine is just the norm, then of course this is probably much better for our mental health. But we can also, but perhaps there wouldn't be such an impact we would have. And so being here makes us, puts us in a very, gives us a particular responsibility, and knowing that all of you who are here are taking this responsibility very seriously makes me feel very calm. And so I think, yes, it's hard, but there is a reason why we are here so far.
Is there volume? Is this mic on? Can you hear me? I just wanted to respond to your question about the struggle in South Africa and whether it was seen as being anti-white. First of all, let me just say that you don't only lose friends in Germany. I've lost friends in South Africa, and I've been called some very interesting things over the past couple of weeks, which includes being anti-Semitic, of course. But I think the context of the South African struggle was extremely different, because white people can't claim to be victims. Sorry, we've never been in a position of being victims. Whereas what Israel has done is weaponized the whole notion of being victims. So the charge of anti-Semitism, anti-white, doesn't really carry a hell of a lot of weight, because when you're talking to power like that, it doesn't carry the same weight. But interestingly, internally in South Africa, I mean, there's a whole discourse in Israel around facing an existential threat. And white South Africa was fed the same stuff about facing an existential threat. In our case, it was described as the rooi gevaar, which is the red danger, which was the communists, and the swart gevaar, which was the black danger, which is the majority of South Africans. And South Africans were fed a notion that they were facing an existential threat in the face of the black communists who were going to take over and eradicate white people. So some similarities, but a major difference as well.
If I can address the geopolitical challenge very quickly, the comrade here has asked the thorniest question of interstate relations at a time it's so fluid that not only do I want to argue here that the power to change these forces is within us, but your role with Germany could be crucial, because there's three imperialist powers that are lining up with Israel, as you'd expect, is U.S., U.K., and on Friday, Germany in such a irrational way. And before getting to them, we just have to remind ourselves that there are major countries and progressive countries, Brazil on the center left, and Bolivia and Colombia, that came in to support South Africa's case. That was fantastic to finally get that swell. And also huge countries, even if led by reactionary governments like Pakistan and Turkey, they supported the South African case. So the geopolitical situation, given that those have been sub-imperial allies of the United States, is fluid. And I think the crucial thing, and I'll speak about this next Wednesday at Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung, 10 a.m. if you'd like to come, these geopolitical arrangements are also centering around something emerging, BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, plus 5 new members. And this is where it gets absolutely critical to, again, put the power within the society, not rely upon states, because the logical 4 sub-imperial powers within the Middle East that the US has always relied upon, even Robert F. Kennedy Jr., supposedly anti-empire candidate, but Jill Stein and Cornel West are more reliable in this race this year, you comrades from the US know. But Robert F. Kennedy just said, we need Israel because it's our aircraft carrier in the Middle East. But there are 3 others, right? Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Egypt. And those 3 are also in the BRICS plus. And along with Iran and Ethiopia. Ethiopia also lines up with Israel because of their historic ties of Ethiopia-Israeli Jewish migration, circular migration. But the dilemma here is that when Vladimir Putin hosts the BRICS, which is in October in Kazan, there's an incredibly important pro-Israeli force, which is India. So you've got India and Egypt and Saudi Arabia and UAE, and to some extent Ethiopia. But what did Sergei Lavrov just say about Israel? He said that the logic of going from Russia and illegally invading Ukraine to denazify is identical, his term, to what the Israelis are doing in Gaza. Now, I don't understand that and where the political logic is, but it just means, dear comrades, that if you think the BRICS might be an anti-imperialist ally in this, think again. We learned in August when the BRICS Plus emerged that there's no logic to this. This is a geopolitical swamp where imperial and sub-imperial forces are shifting around. What we saw last month in Dubai, you saw it, right? We saw Dubai hosting as a sub-imperial power, but run by an oil man, the United Nations Climate Summit. And there is the most strong tie between the imperialists and the sub-imperialists, isn't it? They have 2 objectives: don't cut emissions to save us from planetary arson, and never admit liability. Germany's part of that. Never admit that polluter pays applies to climate, that if you have caused more emissions, you have a reparations bill. Those are the crucial things that unite, which means for the comrades asking, can we rely on this country and that country, and how do we put pressure? I say, dear comrades, the power is within us, not them.
Thanks very much, everybody. This is very inspiring. Everything that's being said. Is the voice not big enough?
It's got to be louder, I think.
I want to invite you all to a meeting tomorrow. There are so many meetings. But what's important here is we're all saying the same thing. It's not enough to talk, to share history and information. Our meeting tomorrow has the students who occupied the lecture hall in the university, were then beaten up by the police. They're now being dragged before the court by the university. Somebody was meant to give a lecture for them, saying he never had students have a lecture cancelled in this way. We have Udi Raz there from Jewish Voice, who was cancelled by the Jewish Museum for using the word apartheid. We'll have Lilith Kutcherel, who is Armenian, and she will be explaining how settler colonialist Israel is going to drive out all the Armenian Christians in Jerusalem. And our main speakers, Kassam Masri, who's been to Egypt trying to get into Gaza, didn't get in as a Palestinian speaker, and BDS Berlin. Please come, because we don't have another meeting here like this one, which is really amazing and inspiring. We want to have a strategy discussion, because quite honestly, if I listen to us all, we have these fights, we lose some friends, they defriend us or we defriend them, life goes on. We are in Germany. We have to recognise how many people have already been fired. The people for No Union have been terrified. Candice Brits says she's been a professor here for 22 years and she gets fired. And when I protested about Afro-futurist in Essen, because a friend of mine asked me to write to the Volkswagen Museum, they didn't answer my email. I had sweated bricks to write it nicely in German, so I wrote to them again saying, you are required by law to answer these emails. They didn't answer this either. And the speaker for a meeting tomorrow from South Africa wanted to animate you all to direct action. Sorry, not from South Africa, and South America. I'm not allowed to say anymore. She was terrorized in her school. Somebody read her social media, reported to the director. We have to recognize what people are saying when they speak to us in demos. Syrian people, African people, Irish people, is that the atmosphere here is like this. You have to leave before you get driven out. Irish people have an EU passport, they won't be driven out, but there will be other things happen, maybe to the girlfriend who's black. And we have to see we're not doing enough. We have to find a more unified voice which is going to frighten established Germany. And I think some people think this can't be done. We have to do it. We don't have an alternative. Why is Joe Sciallo, the culture senator, why is he still in office? We have this like what you decide, I told you to do something, and he wants to read our social media for the last 7 years. Maybe he wants to come into our flat as well and read our letters. We have to really realise what's happening here. It's incredibly dangerous, and not for me. I'm Irish, so I have an EU passport. I'm not endangered like the POC person here, or also certainly Jewish people who make clear that they are not in solidarity with Israel's genocide. I invite you to come to that place. That's in Bilgeserai, 045 Kreuzberg. You'll find us with the right to resist, because we started as a Ukraine solidarity group. What we want to do in this meeting is to have an open space where we form work groups which will move towards getting a much more united voice of all the different strands we have here. Please come, everybody. We have to do more than we've been doing up to now. Thanks.
Sorry, really quickly, can you repeat the address very
Oranienstraße 45.
Oranienstraße 45. Tomorrow at 7 o'clock.
Oyun.
People are signing us here the right to resist on Facebook, Instagram, Telegram, Twitter. Right to resist, Berlin, or for the right to resist.
Okay, right to resist on social media.
Thank you so much. I think I cannot stand up.
Okay.
I'm here really locked. I would really like to add some points that we could include in demands towards the German government. I'm also a German lawyer. I work in the topics of migration.
Louder, please.
Asylum, so I don't know where. Okay, and within many German NGOs, and we experienced many wars and humanitarian catastrophes within the last years. For example, like the fall of Afghanistan, the war started in Ukraine, the earthquake in Turkey, Syria, etc. And the way, like, also our NGO community reaction was very different, and there are so many points I missed in the discourse, and I would just like to share them here, and maybe you can include them in your demands. So what we had, for example, in these other contexts, the demand for resettlement of people who are still in the area, which is affected with German passports. And I have never really heard this as a like this. Nobody's talking about this, but there are like people like for. I mean, this is a point that we could ask towards German government or other governments to at least help get people with a passport out of the country, out of the situation, or there are people who have a residence permit from Germany who are stuck there. We get many emails like this, or people have tried, like this is a linkage that we can formulate. And with Ukraine, there were people being like heard from war and then evacuated to Germany for treatment. And I feel in this context, no one brings, like, no one even talks about this. You can even, like, and it's really not, I raised this also to my colleagues, that maybe these are points that, like, I know we would treat this situation differently if it was another conflict. Then we would ask for a resettlement program. We would ask German government to hand out visa, to protect people who are here on visa that are expiring now. But the situation is treated very differently, and I hope it was not too chaotic, but maybe these are points that each of one working in its context can include and maybe bring some more pressure. I hope it was clear.
I have a lot of thoughts on my mind hearing from you all. Yeah, but I mean, as someone from Gaza, how do I see the ICG and all those things? First of all, what I admire the most about the decision, regardless of the rule, what would they say at the end? A genocide or not, it is a genocide. What's happening there is a genocide. And I think the court should not be, our focus should be supported, but should not be the only thing we focus on. But what I like the most about what South Africa did, or the speeches, the things that they've done, is that they mentioned the crimes that Israel committed since 1948, and I think all political organizations, all human rights organizations, all those who call themselves allies should learn from that and not start from the military occupation of 1976. So it started way, way, way before, and I think this is a first, to say on this international level, to say 1948. I mean, even Amnesty and Human Rights Watch is yeah, it started a few years ago, but not 1948, not 75 years. And I think we should seize the moment to say, yeah, 1948, even like B'Tselem and other organizations, that they just ignore all these years between 1948 till the military occupation of Gaza and West Bank. This is one thing. Yeah, I like that it was not ambiguous, was unapologetic, saying all those things boom, 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 we don't care. And they just yeah, they didn't compromise. The speech that was being said there, it is the kind of support or the kind of words that we need to build on and see it as a model, I would say. The second thing, just things are not connected to each other, but I've been hearing, it's about Namibia. I find the statement very, very, very important, and I have a lot. I translated it to German, and I have it as flyers here, and with the QR codes, the official statement. So if anyone wants it, I can give it in my bag. But what I noticed, I've been waiting 48 hours to see in the German media. We have hundreds of German media outlets here, and not a single media outlet reported in that. And I was it's not shame on them, but I said, this is scary. How coordinated things are, that not a single media outlet reported on that. I think this should scare us all. We live in a first world country, democracy, and somehow all media outlets will not report on a specific thing, and it comes from the First Lady of Namibia, from the Presidency of Namibia, and then suddenly, we don't see, we don't hear with it, the German media just pretends it does not exist. This is something we should be worried about. And now, why Germany? Why Germany is defending itself? I think why Germany is defending Israel. Germany is defending itself actually when it defends Israel, and yeah, it's not guilt and other things, interest. And Germany is committing. I usually say the U.S., Britain, and Germany are committing a genocide in Gaza, and then they are supporting their hand there to commit a genocide in Gaza. And Nadija, you said at the beginning, I'm wondering what people can do here. And I mean, I left Gaza 5 years ago, and what I think if I'm there, and what I would like people to do in these countries that are supporting the genocide with the tax money. If you work here, then you support the genocide in Gaza with tax money. But I would say I don't feel safe here in Europe if dual citizens go fight in the IDF, and they could be sitting next to me in the restaurant after they killed hundreds of babies, and they can walk freely in the airport. No one tells them, hey, you are a terrorist or whatever. And I would think like initiatives to hold everyone accountable who committed a genocide in Gaza, that would be a start. I mean, how would we feel safe and we have like war criminals or murderers among us, and they are just like the neighbors, the owner of this and that, and there are many of them: Belgium, France, the UK, the US, Germany, and I think they should be held accountable. The other things, yeah, I hope so. The other thing is like the factories, the arms, like I love what you said, factories of death. You say that? I love that. Like the high metal und also alle andere factories who are like supplying the occupation army with arms. The third thing, and I think it's very important to me as a Palestinian, is not allowing groups who support Palestine to allowing Palestinian political work in Europe. Taking all those groups and parties off the terror lists, we should allow to make political work here freely, just like any other country. I don't think there's a country or like a movement worldwide where all political parties are not allowed to work. Like, I mean, in Germany it's like horrible, but I mean, we should allow Palestinians not only to speak, we should do political work, like real political work. How can we organize? How can we, yeah, because from what I hear in Germany and elsewhere, actually they are trying to criminalize or label anyone who is like talking about liberation as a terrorist. We cannot ignore that. Like anyone who dares to really work, and it's like leading in the path, like the path of liberation, it's like you get the label, you get banned, and we should somehow allow the political work to be alive again somehow. Like, yeah. And the last thing I want to say, like if you oppose the genocide, people should support the tools that Palestinians are using to fight the genocide. All the ways that Palestinians are using to fight the genocide should be supported. And yeah, you cannot be silent in a time of the genocide. Like, those are my ideas.
So, comrade, can you? I thought of you perhaps when someone mentioned to mobilize for resettlement, and I don't feel comfortable with really answering this question. I thought perhaps you, because I doubt that this could be the first demand of people living in Gaza, because we know that there have been plans to forcibly remove people from Gaza, and this has been objected, of course. And perhaps could you comment on that, how to deal with, I mean, some people need to be resettled, or resettlement is perhaps not the right word, but, you know, to be let out for medical treatment, for example. How to deal with that?
I mean, no, I don't see, like, if we talk about resettlement, taking, like, the population out of Gaza, it serves the object. Like, when people ask me what is the objective of the military campaign, the genocide in Gaza, it's like less people in all ways possible. Just like get rid of people, make Gaza unlivable, unsuitable for life, and get rid of Gaza, because like Gaza for the past 20 years, then somehow like there is the blockade, but people have been living there like occupation free, like I don't see the soldiers on the streets. So been like spearheading I would say like the path toward like liberation. And no, the resettlement is not the solution. I mean, stop the genocide, lift the siege, unconditional humanitarian aid, unconditional medical aid, and just like also don't support that when the genocide stops, that we get plans imposed on us or foreign administration on the Gaza Strip, foreign bodies to govern our Gaza Strip. No, we don't need all those plans. We can do this on our own. All what we need is to stop the genocide. Ceasefire at this point is not enough. I know the slogan is like ceasefire now. Even if they ceasefire now, the genocide gonna continue. I'm telling you, people gonna die. So it should be like with other demands. Stop the genocide, ceasefire now, open Rafah crossing, and yeah, just like get the humanitarian aid, and yeah, once and for all, we need to put this as a package. So I don't think people in Gaza want to or are for the resettlement. They just like don't want bombs being dropped on them, don't want to be like starved to death, like drinking dirty water. And one last thing I wanted to say, actually people in the other side of the border, hundreds if not thousands, are saying open the border, we want to go back to Gaza, and this should say a lot. Yeah.
Because it relates to your
Can I? Yeah.
It relates to this, and it may answer clarify a bit more. It's not resettlement that we're looking for, but when you are under bombardment, you need escape route. You need to flee. You have a safe haven to go to just flee from the bombardment, unless you have a ceasefire. And at the moment, this doesn't seem the way to be the way. Yeah. So if you are in a conflict or disaster, you need to have an escape route, and Gaza doesn't have that unless you have dual nationality. If you have people from outside in certain countries that allow for people to get.
Can you speak louder?
But if you are under bombardment and you have nothing to flee or where you know where safe to go to, even the safe areas that were told for people in Palestine, Gaza were told to go to, were not safe. So I think there is a difference that use the resettlement is a bit tricky because it goes to the intention and the purpose of what you're trying to do. However, if you're talking about safe haven or places to go to flee from the bombardment, a lot of people in Gaza are trying to going for it. But what she said, we all want to go back. It's not like we're forced to go and never to return again. People who left in 48 are still wanting to return. So obviously the ones in Gaza are not going to leave permanently. They just
Oh, yeah, thank you for clarifying. Yeah, my point was mostly like those people who are half German, those people with whom you can put pressure. Yeah, I understand it's very sensitive to form this argument in the correct way, that it helps the people the best way it does. Yeah, and I feel it's not really used as an argument by the actors and other civil. Speak German? Like with Afghanistan, there is a huge, like, it's not successful at all, but there is a reception program of like people being and then brought to Germany, or like a whole evacuation from Ukraine of people being like.
Yeah, you mean the humanitarian visa?
Yes, kind of, exactly. And
Yeah.
I think this, yeah.
And it wasn't offered to the Palestinians.
No, not at all. No one,
Yeah.
and the NGOs don't even demand for it. And this is my point. Yeah.
But I think this
So I don't want to interrupt. This is a very interesting conversation, but I think it probably makes sense to give some other people an opportunity to talk and continue the conversation afterwards, if that's okay.
Next Friday.
Or yeah, exactly. In the back.
Just one thing, the people who want to get outside from Gaza through the Rafah port, sometimes they need to pay €10,000 or $10,000 to just get inside And the second thing, this solution is to repeat the history. It's the same what happened with my father and my grandfather, and why we don't give the same solution for the Israeli. They don't want to live there, and they are afraid from Hamas. Why they don't get to Europe back? If they are afraid from Hamas, and why they want to stay there? Why we don't give the same solution for them to go back to Italy and Germany? Here is safe, or?
Yep. Yes.
Yeah. Just something very quick. I just realized that I forgot that I was a person detained in the Pride Uni occupation. Should have said it when I intervened, and we have a statement in solidarity. I'm very stupid, so I didn't plan how to share it, but yeah, I will try to share it afterwards because the university just announced that they will be taking action against us, and anyway, they are kind of doubling down. They let's say abandon their neutrality position, institutional neutrality, and kind of are going towards legally to the students that were detained. So yeah, I have a solidarity statement that I will share in some way. Only that. Sorry.
It has been shared all over the world.
Yeah, but
Because it's from Britain.
Right.
I wanted to come back to your point about that the history is not being talked of since '48. It already happened before, right? If you look to British colonization and what the British have done to basically put an economic imbalance in between Arabic Muslims, Arabic Jews, Jewish Palestinians, right? This big gap has been produced since long before 48 and long before 45, long before 40, and so on and so forth. So I think recognizing this history and the role that the British had in their mandate zone is very important for a continuously struggle, especially also for the struggles that are connected in between Jews and Muslims, Arabs, Palestinians, and Israelis in general. And then I wanted to point out one power that we have that is pretty difficult to use in Germany is strike, because Germany has a very restrictive strike law. It's not allowed to strike with the trade unions to do political strikes, which is, I think, why we suffer a lot in our political organizations and why we are so faced with so many limits. But there has been, for example, a political strike in the in the harbor of Livorno in Italy against the sending of weapons to Israel, and I think that is also possible to do in Hamburg, in Livorno, or Kiel, in Hamburg or Kiel, especially because there's a big workers' movement going on right now that is striking, that has wild strikes, so political strikes, in order to not sell out the hay bars, because a lot of big companies want to buy them. So there would be already a big organizational structure where political organizations like ours could work together and bring up the best power that we have, which is strike and destroying economical power in Germany, because I don't see another way. Police violence is just going to get more hard, as you can see, so I think we need to organize for strike.
I want to inform you about an ongoing action against weapon industry, German weapon industry cooperating in genocide in Gaza, and we are networking German-wide. The name of the action is Fight for Palestine. There are inside different organization networks that Palestine Speaks or Palestinian Companion are there Rheinmetall entwaffnen. And we did 2 actions already with the rhythm of 2 weeks. We had yesterday in Potsdamer Platz in front of the Deal defense. We were in December in front of a factory of the Rheinmetall group, and we plan, as I told you, every 2 weeks some action. You can inform yourself on Instagram. We have social media, but strategically we are thinking also to go beyond the social media, which when the algorithms are creating we are in a cage. We don't communicate outside of the people are already acquainted. Then we had strategically the intuition to simply go back to the 19th century and to print flyers and go to challenge the people on the street. This is the parallel action, which is not happening every 2 weeks. And we are having really very, very intensive experience. You know how it was mentioned here how the media are creating another reality about what is happening, and people are framing the event in Gaza and in Germany as well in a way that we have to be very focused and very ready to have any kind of reaction. So I want to make you know that you can join us. The action is growing. Yesterday was not only in Berlin, it was in München, in Oberstdorf, in Düsseldorf, and the idea is to go on exposing the cooperation of the German weapon industry and what's happening. What's the name of the
Fight for Palestine.
Fight for Palestine.
Fight for Palestine.
On Instagram.
You will see watermelon.
Yeah, there's watermelon. This is the best we could do until now, but it's not about the single.
Thank you for your contributions. I really appreciated this panel. I wanted to ask you all now, in the light of people going on the streets against AfD and people claiming that they're against fascism, that they care about gender equality, that they care about sustainability, what practical arguments do you have that we can give them? Because I'm running out of ways to convince people to say how hypocritical that is if they don't stand with Palestine. And how have you, as successful activists, convinced more people to go from silence to active solidarity?
I have a very simple question here. Like, how can we stop paying taxes to this institution? Because essentially they are taking our money and manufacturing bombs and shipping it there. At least, how can we even prevent paying the radio tax? So that, because the media is absolutely being a lapdog media, they are not doing anything. So how can we at least stop paying the radio tax?
Just a couple of people have been asking me, oh, when's that meeting group, when's that meeting on Gaza? The list that went round, the list that's on the table, you can sign up for a weekly newsletter which will tell you what after about how we can better cover what you're doing, how if you want to write for us about what you're doing, how we can do it better. Just a quick self-listing.
I would like to add something regarding the question about how to argue with people who are talking about SDA or whatever. Always come with the direction of sustainability technology. It is happening now. It's destroying everything on our planet. So I think from this floor you can always understand who's like the greenwash people. Who's like, I think this is very stupid to talk about animals' rights while at the same time they're killing people, killing innocent people, or even people in general, even if they did something. It doesn't justify what is happening there. So to the people who think I'm very green sustainable because I have a lot of these people around, I was trying, I'm now working in an article how to convince them
I also want to add about how to cope with basically
Can you speak louder?
Okay, sorry. I think the problem of talking with the Europeans about Palestine is what they say is complicated. And but as I'm from Korea, and it took me just 5 minutes to understand what's going on. What people are doing here, and I really love Palestinian people are fighting in front the line of the field. And what I want to say is that we have to make sure that white people are the minor voice. We are the mainstream, we are the major voice, we are the vast population in the world actually. But if you just keep trying to persuade white people and then we're just losing time.
Because they have the money. We're poor. We don't have power, that's why.
I think the only power we have is us. And we have to believe in, what I believe is that those who are having experience of colonization, it's so easy to understand what's going on. And those who have no experience of colonization, they have so much time and they even have no will to understand. And that's why I want to really like I want to ask, I think it's too maybe realistic, too detailed expressions. I want to have more languages in flyers and videos. Then they will listen and they will maybe by chance read it. And maybe like me, like just 2 seconds I understand.
Very good. I'm going to take we'll have just a couple more contributions and then we'll wrap up with some announcements. Come out here.
I have a question to Comrade Patrick. I'm happy to know that your advisor was David Harvey. I am a lecturer, a reader of him. And my question will be with someone had talked about colonization and Western moralism. And my question is, I don't think the situation after this time that will be some peace process. The peace process orthodoxy, the American elite ideology is gone. It will be no two-state solution. In my opinion, lots of politicians from the world say that there will be really. We must overcome this ideology of peace process. This is a colonization, it's settler colonization, and we know we must overcome also this Western morality. And we think about violence, because every emancipation against colonialism was true violence. We must see the violence not inside the Western moralism, but the rethinking the violence from the perspective of the people who get colonized. And that's a big problem today, because we still do some connection about violence and terrorism and this Western ideology about violence. What are the possibility to legitimize decolonizing and decolonize also the concept of violence against occupation in Palestine, because there will be the people in Palestine who will try to struggle against occupation, and one of the agency of transformation of decolonization is violence. I think, in my opinion, we can't not, that is history, we can't not decolonize a land, a people, without using some kind of violence. That's what the question is.
Okay, I think right here, this comment here will be the last contribution, and then we'll give our speakers a quick chance to respond.
Just as an answer to you, I think violence is the only answer. There is no other answer. There is no international community that will help us. There is no violence should be answered with violence. Thank you.
But we need to retake the violence to produce our another form of thinking the violence, not the Western one. That's the question.
Oh, that's tough because, dear comrades, I worked for a terrorist. I was in his office, 1994, 1996, typing the first South African government policies. His name? Nelson Mandela. And until 2008 in the United States, where I had done my studies, he was considered officially a terrorist. And I think delegitimizing what is that term, what is violence, because there's I'm not going to answer, Frantz Fanon will help us go through parts of this question, but what I fear, because Comrade Nadija said, where will this go? I fear what I saw in Gaza in 2011, and I was in Ramallah, and the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung had asked me to come as someone who could see economic violence. And economic violence is what happens when sometimes there is a political settlement and you haven't sorted out where is justice. So peace without justice is what we unfortunately have in South Africa. And what I saw in 2011 in Gaza and in the West Bank was a very tricky strategy by the most sophisticated imperialist, probably in recent memory. His name was Barack Obama. As the US president, he was trying, and he used the IMF and the World Bank at the time of the Arab Spring. Do you remember the North African uprising, the Arab Spring? And that was an IMF riot in many ways. It was even starting in Tunisia in December 2010, when Mohamed Bouazizi self-immolated and sparked the wonderful protests that were partly against elite corruption, but also economic injustice. And it was that economic injustice that I could see, and Rosa Luxemburg has it on their website, you can read my paper. That was the enemy's strategy, to impose sophisticated versions of neoliberalism, of economic violence. So in a way, that's where I think we'll end up, if we have this discussion again, comrades, in another few years, is thinking about the different forms of oppression. And it does just remind me to quickly say, South Africa is an incredible country, and the step forward to make genocide charges against Israel was absolutely, as Barbara said, the most heartwarming, but also politically important gesture, because it will help all of us say to the German government or the US or the UK, you are facilitating the genocide. But there is still a struggle in South Africa. So just since we're all thinking about what it is our politics represent, there are two huge demands that the South African solidarity committees in major protest marches are demanding. So keep an eye to break diplomatic relations. And even though we have a fantastic foreign minister, Naledi Pandor, she said, maybe not. And the other, which our capitalist class is very clear about, boycott, divestment, sanctions from below the lobby of powerful forces in South Africa, the capitalist class, and the ruling party leadership, they're saying no. So when we say there's going to be solidarity around the world, that's going to go everywhere, including one of the most liberated sites. Thanks, dear comrades. Amandla, away to...
Thanks. I think if I can just reflect on the issue of violence or the armed struggle from the South African perspective, there was no way that the armed struggle in South Africa was actually ever going to win the war as a military war. Much like the situation in Israel, South Africa had this, the white South Africa had an incredibly well-resourced and powerful military. But it was a critical part of a struggle that was fought on a whole lot of fronts, and I think that's the challenge, is that you have to fight the struggle on a number of fronts. What ultimately was probably most powerful in South Africa was economic sanctions. Cultural boycott, sports boycott. Hit South Africans very hard, that our rugby players weren't allowed, I'm sorry, it's bizarre, but that our rugby players weren't allowed to play rugby. Really got white South Africans kind of confused and bewildered and unhappy. But economic sanctions and the numerous fronts coming together. And I think that is what the challenge is to carry forward the struggle on all of those levels. I think just the other thing in terms of my experience, I like the idea of going back to the 90s and the 1900s and printing flyers. I hope it was the 20th century, I mean the 1990s and printing flyers. But I grew up in a time, I mean I was involved in a struggle in a time when there wasn't social media. And it really was about legwork, and it was about flyers, and it was about posters, and it was about meeting people and sitting and not talking in the algorithm group of social media, but really getting out and doing the legwork and making sure. And I've seen it as part of the conversation here tonight, and it's really good to hear it, that bringing the various small groups together into a bigger group, coordinating, trying to make sure that we. Sometimes in the left we have a horrible tendency to splinter into ever smaller groups, and the right sits and laughs at us. We really do need to bring those groups together and get that momentum and get that big wave going, all working together. That's how we did it in South Africa.
I would like to pick on what the comrades have said about the different means, the different tools for liberation. I always like to talk about the spectrum of liberation. I think it can be from armed struggle to boycott to even trying to fight in the courts for justice. It is certainly like the one cannot live without the other. We need to think about liberation as a spectrum. That's what I strongly believe in. And at the same time, I want to say that, you know, people have been asking me a lot recently, okay, this is injustice. What can we do about this? How can we win cases? How can we charge them? How can we, you know, go to the courts and demand justice and demand our freedom? And I will be honest with you, I have started to run out of ideas, because sometimes, even though I believe that the law is also part of the spectrum of liberation, sometimes it's not the right moment to do that. And at this moment, I just want to remind us that what gave us the right, the freedom to assembly, the right to protest, freedom of speech back here in Berlin, in Germany, was the collective answer on Sonnenallee in Neukölln against police violence, against the demonstration bans, against the defamation, against the threats of deportation, the massive outcome of people and solidarity that pushed back. We did not win any of those cases. This was not a result of any legal struggle, but it was really the streets. So don't forget that, and don't forget the power that lies within that. And of course, at some point, and in some point in history, we will also use that power to argue in the future in courts, or vice versa, give the streets power that we have received from winning court cases. So the one is not better than the other, but we need each other. And I would like, if you allow me to end with something I read in the social media world. And I do not know the author, so I apologize for not being able to give any credit, but I think it is very, I read it sometimes when I don't know what to tell my German friends, when I don't know why the trade unions, for example, the workers don't support Palestine here in Germany, when I don't know how to convince people that what happens in Palestine is part of their very struggle, their very own struggle. And it goes like this. We are losing. We are losing to tyranny as it unravels India's deeply fractured society. We are losing to narrow nationalism as it facilitates American and European society to cannibalize itself. We're losing to dead ideas as austerity politics devour what's left of a liberated South Africa. We're losing to capitalism as economic power becomes more concentrated than ever before. And in its resilience, it mutates and spreads devastating the weak, the poor, and those forced to the margins of society. And our planet is literally burning. Any remnants of hope for a better world is combusting into an already dense and polluted atmosphere. The movements that we have relied on for oxygen can no longer breathe. Movements of young people, movements of workers, movements of women, crushed under the knees of neoliberalism. And then there's Palestine, a struggle that embodies it all. Its mothers, its fathers, and its working class youth armed with stones, fireworks, and audacity. Coming face to face with soldiers armed with rifles and the most advanced military in the world, defying a 70-year sophisticated attempt of erasing their history and tradition and memory, blocking out 70 years of bombs, 70 years of shouldering bodies that look too small to be wrapped in white sheets, resisting 70 years of ethnic cleansing. And they will not lose. Palestine is hope. So yes, Palestine is important because its history, its land, and its people are divine. Palestine is important because its struggle is a struggle against the final stand of settler colonialism. And Palestine is important because if we lose Palestine, we lose everything.